Welcome back to Shrekcember. Now, movie sequels are a hard thing to do at the best of times. That's why there's only really a handful of sequels that are as good or better than the original. Animated movie sequels have an even worse track record. Probably the bottom of the barrel stuff being the direct-to-video crap churned out by the Disney company. So you can imagine my surprise that 2004's Shrek 2 actually manages to rise above all the potential pitfalls and become, in my mind at least, a truly worthy sequel that is in some regards maybe even a little better than the original, but I'll get to that in a bit. One very important thing to note about this sequel going in is that the first movie's writers did not return to the project. They felt the franchise was moving far away from its fairy tale roots, and they could not abide that. That being said, this movie had 9 different people on writing duties, which for most other films would be a recipe for disaster. And make no mistake, Shrek 2 is indeed a bold departure from the first movie. There are more pop culture references than ever before, more variety of jokes than ever before, from sight gags and even musical jokes like the Hawaii 5-0 theme and Godzilla's screech, just to name a few. What I'm trying to say is Shrek 2 is a movie that spins a lot of plates, and it could very easily have buckled and broke under the weight of all this new stuff that's been put into it, but man alive if it just doesn't kinda work.
Now, this is it.
This is it.
Can show off her new husband.
The story as it is finds Shrek and Fiona visiting the kingdom of Far, Far Away in order to get the blessing of Fiona's parents, the king and queen. Needless to say, they aren't crazy about ogres, and the whole movie, as Jeffrey Katzenberg put it, is meant to invoke a kind of guess who's coming to dinner feel, which in and of itself is a pretty bold move for what most consider to be a kids movie. Beyond that, the film's emotional through line is all about Shrek struggling to feel good enough for Fiona's parents, and by extension, Fiona herself, even if it means changing his ogre self by any means necessary. The first one was all about them falling in love, and the sequel is about them trying to stay in love. The sequel also substantially steps up their villain game, with the fairy godmother who acts much more like a typical mafia godfather, who offers happiness for a price, of course, and who, as we find out in the end, is actually made of tears. Then there's Prince Charming, the godmother's dim-witted blonde son who wants nothing more than to be king. Yet again, the movie runs with this interesting idea that all the fairy tale good guys are actually bad, and all the so-called bad guys are actually good. And then, of course, there's Antonio Banderas' scene-stealing, Zorro-riffing Puss in Boots. Fun fact, Banderas actually provides the voice of Puss in both the English and Spanish versions of the movie. Now, a weaker film could very well have had Puss come off as a Poochie type, or either hijack the film completely, but he comes in just late enough in the film, and even then he's such a tongue-in-cheek crack at the Disney company's tendency to overload their movies with more and more talking animal sidekicks.
Pray for mercy from Puss in Boots. Fear me if you dare.
I'm sorry, the position of annoying talking animal has already been taken.
Shrek 2's big second act twist actually finds Shrek turning into a human and Donkey turning into a stallion, which of course leads to no end of shenanigans. What's crazy is that this idea was actually supposed to be much bigger in the original script, with Dragon also being involved and becoming a unicorn of all things. Understandably, this was dropped from the final movie, but it kind of makes you wonder what it would have looked like. Speaking of which, originally Fiona's dad, the king, voiced by John Cleese, was supposed to appear completely nude as a nod to the story of the Emperor's New Clothes. Yet again, it's understandable why this didn't make the final cut either. That being said, the king ends up being probably one of the most interesting and compelling characters in the entire movie, having a fully formed 3-dimensional arc in which we find out that a lot of his hatred of Shrek stems from his own projecting. Once more, the musical choices are all great. Granted, for this second outing, a couple of the songs do feel a tad on the nose. I mean, a cover of David Bowie's Changes After a Big Change, or a song about letting things go while Shrek needs to let something go. No, not that version of Let It Go, but you get where I'm coming from, right? The action in this movie is also as big as the comedy, the standout scene being a very impressive last-minute dash with Shrek and friends trying to get to Fiona before midnight, because hey, it's fairy tales and it's always midnight, am I right? This scene set to the song I Need a Hero is so great and so exhilarating that I'm pretty sure Saints Row pretty much ripped this one off entirely for their third outing. All in all, Shrek 2 is one of the very few sequels that I feel manages to stand head and shoulders with the original, delivering a laugh a minute. It's an organic feeling sequel that wraps up pretty much every dangling plot thread from the first movie and leaves the audience on a very high note. Had this been the end of the series, I think it would have left things in a great place. Oh, but this is Hollywood and nothing can never be left well enough alone, can it? Be sure to tune in next time when I cover Shrek 3, and remember, Shrekcember is love, Shrekcember is life.